Coming up, last year, the pandemic forced the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to run the 500 without fans for the first time ever. This year, fans are back for the 105th running of the race. Penske Entertainment CEO Mark Miles is here to talk economic impact and the future of IndyCar racing. Plus,
I'm Mary Rachel Redmond. It's officially race weekend in Speedway. Coming up, I'll tell you how this three-time Indy 500 winner is taking the art of driving beyond the track. Johnny Rutherford, the artist? Stick around to find out.
And defense contractor MANTECH services every branch of the U.S. military and installations, including Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane in southern Indiana. Crane is one of MANTECH's biggest clients. It's getting much bigger. Executive Director Roy Streeter has details. And we'll have details on those stories and much more ahead on this edition of Inside Indiana Business. Hello and welcome to Inside Indiana Business. I'm Gary Dick. It is race weekend in Indianapolis, and for the first time in 2 years, fans will be back at the world's greatest race course, at least up to 40% capacity, or about 135,000 fans. After last year's race in August in front of empty stands, it is welcome news and promises to bring some much-needed economic impact as well. How much? And how might this year's race influence other big-time sporting events? For some answers, pleased to welcome back to the show Penske Entertainment Corporation CEO Mark Miles. Mark, as always, great to see you.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks for inviting us.
And on a busy weekend, certainly, you think back to, it's been a short turnaround, the race last year in August, no fans then, but putting things together, going section by section to figure out how to do the social distancing and all those types of things. What have the last 8 or 9 months been like to get to this point where you're ready for the 105th running?
In some ways, it just seems like a continuation of last year where we were constantly planning for every imaginable contingency. As it turned out last year, as you've said, for the most part, we just couldn't welcome fans, but we had plans to do different procedures at the gates. Had fans been able to come in, to seat them differently, and on and on and on. So we just extended that. We worked closely with the state and then ultimately with the city of Indianapolis and got to an agreement on what the protocols would be just seems like about 3 weeks ago. But we're so ready to have the 105th running. We feel like we're prepared and we're ready to do everything that is required. Yep,
a lot of business developments around IndyCar that we'll get to in a moment. But first, 40% capacity, 135,000 fans or so. Not like having 250,000 plus, but yet there's economic impact here, and it's creating a vibe that's a lot different, obviously, than it was last year. So things look and feel, I guess, a lot different this year.
Yeah, well, you feel it locally for sure and around the state and around the country. Aside from the Speedway, things are opening up. The same day as the race on Sunday is the big NASCAR race in Charlotte, the Coke 600. Yep. They're not going to have any limitations on how many people can be in their stands. They don't require social distancing in the stands, and they won't require masks. So, and that's happening in a lot of other sports. It's happening, and that's really good. People are ready for it. It's great for the economy.
Yeah, the 500 is going to be the biggest event to be held since the pandemic began. I know the heads of other sports leagues and entities, the NBA, NFL, and others, I think they've been called you. Is that right? And called the Speedway to offer support, and also maybe wonder how you're putting things together?
Yeah, really, since the pandemic struck a year ago, March, all of us have been in close contact. We've talked to the folks at Churchill Downs, at Augusta, in the other leagues, teams like at the Colts and the Pacers, and we learn from each other. We also talk to people at the universities. They have many of the same problems, sometimes even amplified. So, all of us is smarter than some of us, and we've tried to really be inclusive in our planning.
Yeah, certainly economic impact being generated this weekend with 40% capacity. But there are other big developments really around IndyCar racing and the NTT IndyCar Series, including NTT signing on to extend that title sponsorship.
Yeah, that was huge. That was an announcement we were able to make about a week ago. NTT is the title sponsor of the IndyCar Series, so we call it the NTT IndyCar Series. They're a great global company, a real powerhouse, over $150 billion in revenue. And they're fundamentally a technology company, and we are fundamentally a technology-driven sport. So it's not just the promotional relationship, it's the development work they've done, which includes things like launching a new IndyCar Series app powered by NTT a year ago. The downloads and the use of the app are growing every race. So they're really a critical partner for us. We've signed 5 or 6 other partners that will be getting engaged next year. And of course, we're in the early stages of, really, I should say more than the early stages. We're working hard on extending or making our future media rights.
We'll talk about that if you could, Mark, so I wanted to bring that up. The deal with NBC, a lot was said and talked about that when that happened. I've read and seen, kind of heard anecdotally, a lot of positive reaction to how NBC has covered it, how they've cross-promoted through their properties. What are your thoughts on that, extending that deal? Well,
I think NBC has been a great partner. This has been the first period of time when we've had one broadcast partner in the U.S. Previously, as you know, it was split between 2 broadcasters, some on network and some on cable. Didn't really optimize the opportunities for promoting the whole series. I think NBC, having it all, has been the right move, and they've done a great job with it. But there's a lot to work through. We're interested in growing the amount of promotion, the amount of events that might be on network television. What will the streaming opportunity be? What is the role for cable? What will they do in terms of future promotions? And we wanted to spend the time to make sure that we understood what all the appetites among other media partners might be before we conclude an arrangement.
Yep. Hey, only have 30 seconds, Mark, but how would you put a bottom line on where the sport is, where IndyCar is right now, coming out of the pandemic, all the challenges over the past number of months? How do you feel about the sport?
I feel great. We're growing. You know, we might not have predicted that a year ago, but we have more teams, great competition, and all of our business partners are extending and getting more engaged. So we think the future is very bright.
Penske Entertainment CEO Mark Miles, as always, great to see you. Thanks for joining us, and good luck this weekend and beyond.
Thanks, Gary.
All right. Well, Indianapolis Motor Speedway President Doug Boles wears his passion for IMS and racing on his sleeve. He was my guest recently on the Business and Beyond podcast. He was born just west of the track in Danville, grew up making 3x5 index cards of race qualifiers at the kitchen table. He describes his attitude during the month of May as like a kid in a candy store.
In a lot of ways, it's better than Christmas, right? I mean, it is my favorite time of the year. You know, my favorite moment of the year, those 90 seconds when Back Home Again in Indiana is performed. And for those moments, everybody in the venue, everybody watching on TV is a Hoosier. And for me, it's just because I love so much being a Hoosier. It's that moment when you realize that we're on an international stage through the Indianapolis 500 in our race that people around the world watch. And those are the things that it just hits me, that everybody's eyes around the world are on Indiana.
And you can check out my conversation with Doug Boles and all of my guests on the Business and Beyond podcast by going to InsideIndianaBusiness.com and clicking on the subscribe tab. Well, he had a knack for driving fast and winning races. 3-time Indy 500 winner Johnny Rutherford also has an eye for a much more serene craft. Mary Rachel Redmond catches up with Lone Star JR to check out his work for the cover of this year's race program. Here's what's making news now around Indiana, brought to you by Chapman Heating, Air Conditioning and Plumbing, the man for all seasons. Chapman, chapmanheating.com. Indy 500 programs throughout the years have become sacred keepsakes for diehard race fans. There are even some that have become high-dollar collector's items. But this year's program is in a class all its own. Around Indiana reporter Mary Rachel Redmond joins us now with details.
Thanks, Gary. Well, it's no secret race fans have been chomping at the bit to get back to the track. Whether it's the speed, the tradition, or the roar of the engine, there's no question that for many lifelong racegoers, an A.J. Foyt or Rick Mears sighting can be just as exciting as watching the race itself. Believe me, I get it. I was lucky enough to catch up with the legendary Johnny Rutherford at the track last week and found out the three-time Indy 500 champ is a man of many talents off the track, especially with a few pencils and a sketch pad. And that's why someone at IMS reached out to JR for a special project. That project? Drawing the program cover for the 105th running of the Indy 500, a cover that's being billed as one of the most unique in all of race history. Why? Well, it's not very often, and perhaps in this case probably ever, that a legendary Indy 500 driver can also draw. And we're not talking stick figures. Rutherford used pencil to intricately sketch the cars of his one-time competitors, A.J. Foyt, Al Unser Sr., and Rick Mears, the three winningest drivers in 500 history. With the help of IMS graphic designer Amaya Mims, Rutherford's sketches are now immortalized on the front of the 200-plus page souvenir.
I like to do pencil, soft lead pencil drawings and smear them, shade them, make them look like a black and white photograph. You like to make sure you get the proportions right and everything in perspective and looking like it was, and that's what came out on the cover of the program.
The fans love JR, so people would love to have a program book with his artwork on it. He got all geared up, sent over the sketches of the cars. Once they were in my possession, I took them, beefed them up a little bit, enhanced the colors, added a little bit of touches of my own stuff with the speed blurs and the speed streaks, added the legendary yard of bricks and the track, and kind of put together the concept.
I would like to have had maybe a little more time, but I thought it turned out really great.
Rutherford tells me since completing the cover for this year's program, he plans to really get back into his art, including oil painting. I also asked him what was harder, driving in the actual race or drawing the cover. With an absolute straight face, he said, drawing the cover. Unbelievable. Gary?
All right, Mary Rachel, thank you. Well, also making headlines around Indiana this week, South Bend-based nonprofit, the Judd Layton Foundation, says it has created a capital investment fund aimed at helping early-stage startups in northern Indiana. The organization says the Layton Elevate Angel Development Fund is a partnership with Indianapolis-based Elevate Ventures. The program is supported by the South Bend Elkhart Regional Partnership. The foundation says the lead fund totals $1 million and will make investments ranging from $50,000 to $200,000. Jasper-based Indiana Furniture wants to expand. WFIE TV in Evansville reporting the more than 115-year-old company plans to invest $17 million to relocate production to a larger location on the south side of the Du Bois County city. CEO Max Verkamp says the company plans to build new ground-level buildings to help streamline the production process and also add a small number of jobs. Crossroads YMCA in Hammond has announced plans for a new and greatly expanded facility. The organization partnering with the city to create a $45 million destination YMCA at the former Woodmar Mall site, which the city says will triple the size of the current facility and also create some 200 jobs. The YMCA says the new location will serve up to 50,000 people in Lake County, and it is expected to open in 2024. Well, a multi-billion-dollar defense contractor is expanding operations in southwest Indiana. Coming up next, the economic impact of MANTECH's growing footprint at Naval Surface Warfare Center, Crane. It's time to go inside innovation, brought to you by Allegiant, pioneering safety. Well, MANTECH is a Virginia-based defense contractor that was founded in 1968. It serves every branch of the U.S. military, including installations like Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane in southern Indiana. It is continuing to grow its Indiana footprint in a number of ways, and with more on MANTECH's growing crane portfolio and the impact, pleased to welcome Executive Director Roy Streeter. Roy, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Gary. Glad to be here.
Okay, MANTECH is a big company, big defense company, $2.5 billion company based in Virginia. Give us the kind of the thumbnail description of what MANTECH is all about.
Well, MANTECH is about bringing digital to the mission, working collaboratively with the government as contractual partners against adversaries and near-peer competitors, bringing those capabilities and solutions to the warfighter to combat those.
And your company, MANTECH, is really connected and doing work for every branch of the U.S. military for installations all over the United States. The relationship with Crane began with those first couple of contracts in 2018 and has grown from there. Talk about the relationship with Crane, because I know it's growing in a big way.
Sure. In 2018, we was able to secure the win of 3 RDT&E, which is research, development, test, and evaluation contracts, supporting predominantly the air side of defense out of the NAVAL Navy contracts. So we began in one division of Crane predominantly, and since then we've been fortunate enough to grow the customer base, and now we find ourselves also in the electronic warfare arena too within Crane. So the growth there has been pretty fast. We have went from 2 facilities, and now we're building our 3rd. And employees, our level of employment has went up. We started with 15, and now we're at 100, and we're on a path to double that within the next 2 to 3 years.
So another 100 employees, which is amazing growth trajectory. A lot of people around Indiana will be amazed at some of the technology and the R&D and things going on at Crane. As you look at your investment there, as you mentioned, 3 facilities, what types of things can you talk about will be going on in those facilities?
Sure. So supporting RDT&E, there's a lot of model-based systems engineering where we model out the systems and develop and deliver those types of artifacts. There's obviously some cyber being a class of warfare in itself. So we look at ourselves as industry leading within cyber. We have a digital engineering environment that Crane leverages for digital twinning networks and also component level to provide the solution that they seek.
Yeah, I know you consider yourself MANTECH based in Virginia, but you really do consider yourself an Indiana company, want to really integrate in the community there. And I know you've been working and want to continue to work with several economic development and community groups down there to really enhance that impact, if you will. Yeah,
absolutely. So we started here in 2018, and after our arrival, shortly after, we started working with the Regional Opportunity Initiative, Tina Peterson and her group out of Bloomington. We found ourselves with Radius helping us out tremendously through statewide incentives, getting us into these facilities and capabilities too as well, and also the Indiana Defense Network. We've leveraged the Westgate Authority and Westgate Academy quite a bit. That's where we incubated, and the PURDUE Foundry too as well for workforce development and staffing needs.
Yeah, final question for you. As you look at Crane, massive facility with a lot going on there, obviously, what's the potential for continued growth there at Crane and doing all the things that it does to support the military and the various functions?
Well, in our perspective, there's a wide, great deal of growth that can still be had here for a team MANTECH. We're building a 72,000 square foot facility, which would be our 3rd one, where could house up to 200 employees. We hope to get there. The initiatives and the thrust area of Crane line up extremely nicely to our technical focus areas of MANTECH. So we think the contractual partnership is something that we can continue to support Crane in the future.
All right, and the big news there, too, doubling the workforce, adding another 100 workers in the coming years. Roy Streeter is executive director at MANTECH. Roy, thanks for the perspective, and we look forward to following the story at Crane.
Well, thank you, Gary. I appreciate it.
All right. Well, for decades, workers in Muncie cranked out millions of cases of ball jars. Well, Muncie will soon be cranking out another product critical to the food industry. Details on the global can manufacturer coming to Delaware County with plans for hundreds of jobs. Well, there was some big jobs news in Delaware County this week. Poland-based CanPack selecting Muncie and Delaware County for its second U.S. manufacturing facility. Now, the aluminum beverage can manufacturer is committing to some big numbers. Initially, a $380 million investment and 345 jobs over the next 2 years, but that could grow to 425 jobs and nearly $500 million in investment 2 years beyond that. CanPack is a global manufacturer headquartered in Poland with nearly 8,000 employees in 19 countries. CanPack's regional U.S. manager Tom Johnson tells me aluminum can demand is off the charts, and Indiana, Delaware County, and Muncie show they could provide the workforce to make things happen.
Really put a fantastic foot forward. It's a it's a very business-friendly state. We've read a lot about their commitment to training and developing workforces that are ready to do high-tech manufacturing. And what really came down to it, the collaboration with Delaware County and with the city of Muncie was just really so fantastic. The site was ready. We believe we can get a great workforce here. And they really just put the thing together for us and moved at a speed in which we needed. And that was really our decision maker. The commitment in Indiana to making sure that we've got folks available for the type of workforce that we need. I think we're going to offer a very competitive wage. I think our benefits package is also extremely competitive, and I think that we can really differentiate with our culture. Our culture is very much one that is centered around the customer and our employees. And we believe that comes out in just about everything we do. So we really think the culture that we're building will be the differentiator for us.
Yeah, Tom, this is a big initial investment, but there's the potential for expansion down the road. Talk a little bit about that potential.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're seeing unprecedented growth in the aluminum can market. I mean, our competitors are expanding, we're expanding. If we find ourselves in a position where some of our commercial partners want to sign up for additional volumes, then we'll make the expansions to make sure that we can support the market. That's what this is all about: entering the U.S. in a growth market and being able to support our partners that we've partnered with all over the globe. Demand is just absolutely like anything I've ever seen before. We're in excess of 10 billion cans short in the U.S. market alone. The U.S. market's importing cans from everywhere, and we've always been a market that's sustained ourselves. So we're looking forward to adding capacity and getting back there.
Big news for East Central Indiana. CanPack says construction on its Delaware County plant should begin this summer, with manufacturing to start in the fourth quarter of next year. In our next half hour, leave it to Purdue researchers to discover tissue as small as a piece of gum as a key to successful rotator cuff surgery. We'll show you how it works and why it's gaining traction in the healthcare market. Also ahead, traveling back in time, way back in time, to visit ancient ruins as they really were. Through virtual reality, we'll meet the IU professor behind the high-tech tool in our Eye on Education segment. Well, a torn rotator cuff is a very common shoulder problem in the U.S., with more than 5 million doctor visits each year related to that injury. Now, a new option to surgically repair the torn tendon is now on the market, created by two Boilermaker engineers who say it could cut recovery time in half. Business of Health reporter Kylie Valletta has more. Kylie.
Thank you, Gary. A surgeon in Chicago is the first in the country to begin using the new tissue implant, which was developed entirely at Purdue University. And it's likely more patients will soon have this new option. Sparta Biopharma, a private company on the East Coast, is now marketing the technology to orthopedic surgeons throughout the U.S. Here to tell us more about the product, called BioInthesis, are two of the great minds behind its creation, Dr. Eric NAUMAN, a professor of mechanical and biomedical engineering at Purdue, and Dr. Daryl Dickerson, assistant professor of mechanical and materials engineering at Florida International University. Thank you both for being on the show today.
Our pleasure.
Thank you for having us.
All right, Daryl, I think we should mention right off the top, you're in Florida now, but you were at Purdue when this product was being developed. So let's start with you. Give us, first of all, just a quick explanation of what a torn rotator cuff is and how it's typically repaired.
Right, so the rotator cuff is a series of muscles and tendons that keep your shoulder really in place and allow motion to occur at the shoulder. And a tear is when those tendons and ligaments become damaged in some way, and that can be either over time, so a little bit of resistance that leads to eventual degeneration, or it can be something that's sudden. And what doctors try to do is to repair that structure so that you have the stability in your shoulder and still mobility. And so the way that occurs is you remove the damaged tissue, and then doctors often will try to reattach the rest of the healthy tissue to the underlying bone.
Okay, very good. Eric, so this new technology that you both created at Purdue, it's now on the market, called BioInthesis. It's a tissue implant. Explain what it is and how it works.
It's basically there to repair the orthopedic interface between the tendon and the bone. Essentially, right now, surgeons just kind of press them together and hope that it grows in. What we do is we grind down that top layer of really dense bone and expose the marrow and the adult stem cells that are just below the surface. And then we replace that bone that we ground away with a porous scaffold. Essentially, BioInthesis is just a porous scaffold. It's made out of cancellous bone, spongy bone that you find throughout the body. And when you press it in, the adult stem cells invade. They know that on the mineralized part, they make bone. And we just demineralize that top layer so that the stem cells know that that's where they're supposed to form collagen. And by pressing the damaged tendon against that, you essentially get them to regrow the entire joint surface. And then you end up with, because the BioInthesis is a single entity, you end up with a nice regrown interface that takes you from tendon, cartilage, and then into bone.
All right, Daryl, Eric just touched on this, but talk just a little bit more about the benefits of this tissue implant, how it's better than conventional methods.
Yeah, I think Eric explained it very well. So your tendons in the body are really elastic tissues, really soft, and the bone is very hard. It can be hundreds of times stiffer than what the tendon is. And so you need this structure in order to ensure that the repair, it works well. And so naturally within the body, you have this sort of gradual transition going from the tendon to the bone. And what this new implant does is it helps the body to regrow that. It gives instruction to the body to repair that. Without it, we see, somewhere in the range of 90% of rotator cuff repairs can fail. And so we think that with adding this new enthesis structure, repairing the normal structure of the tendon-bone interface, then we'll see that reduced by quite a bit.
Yes, and also you mentioned earlier, cut the recovery time in half, which is awfully impressive. Eric, this whole idea of focusing on this point where bone and muscle meet, how could that open the door to maybe some other applications? I mean, could this be done in other joints in the body?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, I think the really interesting thing here is that, when Daryl was a student here, he kind of developed his own field of repairing these orthopedic interfaces. And you have interfaces all throughout the body. Every muscle attaches through a tendon into the bone. ligaments attach bone to bone. Cartilage is really only useful because it adheres to the underlying bone tissue. And so we look down the road, we might be able to repair, have new repairs for the ACL, PCL, kind of, give people with knee injury faster repairs. The UCL for baseball pitchers, the Achilles has been in the news lately because that's a huge tendon that's very difficult to repair. That's something that we'd like to go after. But probably the cartilage interfaces are the ones that have the most promise because, osteoarthritis usually starts as a very small focal injury. But then over time, it kind of degenerates more and more and more, and eventually you need a total joint replacement. If we can look at that and repair that before the injury really sets in, we might be able to stave off the need for total joint repairs.
Right, exactly. Daryl, only a couple seconds left. Just tell us quickly, how did the connection come about with Sparta Biopharma? I'll get it right. Now commercializing this.
Yeah, so it came about, actually, Eric and I started a company right after my dissertation defense called Advanced Regenerative Technologies, and Sparta came along looking for a partner for a range of activities, and we decided that this was the right sort of partnership opportunity. And so they've been a great commercialization partner for this, and we think that it will be fruitful for some of the other applications that we just talked about as well.
All right, very good. Good luck, both of you, on the next application. Be sure to tell us about it.
Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And Gary, back to you.
All right, Kylie, thank you. Well, traveling back in time has taken a giant leap forward thanks to an IU professor's new high-tech app. Check this out. This is Rome as it looked in ancient times. Virtual reality being put to work to take users back to visit ruins from around the world to see what they actually looked like literally thousands of years ago. Pleased to welcome to the show Bernie Fisher. And Bernie, professor of informatics at Indiana University. Bernie, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Gary. Thank you for inviting me.
This fascinating technology and what you're doing with technology. You've actually formed a company. You've been thinking about doing this kind of thing, taking these historic sites, ruins and things, and bringing them to life for people for a number of years. Actually, you thought about this concept way back in the 70s, right?
I did. I was a newly arrived fellow of the American Academy in Rome in 1974, and the fellows are always taken on walks and talks to the monuments of Rome. And the first place that our professor took us to was the Plastico di Roma Antica, a great physical model in plaster of Paris of the whole city of ancient Rome, 60 feet across at a scale of 1 to 250, that took 40 years to make. It just was finished in 1973, the year before I arrived. And I thought, coming there with a background in photography, in electronics, and with a PhD in classical studies and archaeology, I thought there's got to be some technical way to get this marvelous monument out of this obscure museum, which, by the way, had been closed for the last 5 years or so, and into the hands of people around the world. Their living rooms, their school rooms. And so what came to be called Rome Reborn was off and running in 1974.
Wow. And you started using video, but that has transformed, obviously, with technology into the digital realm. You've just released a month ago or so, Baalbek Reborn, the historic Lebanese city. Talk about that app. It's a free app that folks can get. Talk about what that's all about.
Yeah, we give it away free. Our company, which I started in 2018 to commercialize this kind of work that I started doing in university labs, is always happy to create free virtual tours to great World Heritage sites around the world. If a philanthropist will step forth and pay the expenses up front, then we'll create it and give it away for free. We've already given away almost 25,000 free copies of Baalbek Reborn. That's a World Heritage site of the country of Lebanon, and it's existed since the Neolithic, so for over 10,000 years. But the peak of it, everybody agrees, and the standing ruins that you see when you go there date to the Roman period. And the philanthropist who funded this, the retired Kuwaiti banker Bassam Al-Ghanem, and who funded it in memory of his parents, took him there when he was a boy, and he fell in love with it. And he always wanted to see, what did it really look like in antiquity? You've got these standing ruins of some of the biggest temples the Romans ever built, but they're just ruins. So we put the flesh back on the bones and show you the way it looks today. And we did that with the help of the German Archaeological Institute in Berlin that has been excavating there the last 20 years. So they're the world's experts. We always work with the world's experts.
Yeah, we'll only have about 30 seconds left, but what's next? This is fascinating technology, bringing history, literally ancient history, to life. What's next?
Well, we've done Rome Reborn, we've done Hadrian's Villa Reborn, we're working now in Egypt Reborn, Mexico Reborn, and Athens Reborn. These will all be out, the first tours, by the end of the year. And now we're moving into this exciting new field of NFTs, non-fungible tokens. And we're talking to the biggest auction house in the world that has had the greatest results with auctions of NFTs. And we have a lot of NFTs in our archive that can be monetized.
Very
so that's
good.
the big
Very
next
good.
big thing.
Baalbek Reborn, flyoverzone.org. That's for the free app. Flyoverzone.com. You see a whole number of locations from around the world for a fee. Fascinating technology. Bernie Fisher from IU, the School of Informatics. Really appreciate it, and congratulations on the endeavor.
Thanks, Gary. Nice to be here. Bye-bye.
Right. Well, this week, Governor Eric Holcomb took a two-day trip to Israel. The governor's office says he was invited by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. During the visit, he also met with Foreign Minister Gabi Ashkenazi and other leaders. This was the governor's second trip to Israel. In 2018, he led a delegation on an economic development trip, which included the signing of a memorandum of understanding with the Israel Innovation Authority, focused on ag, biosciences, life sciences, and cybersecurity. A number of Israeli-based companies call Indiana home now, including manufacturer Polyram Group, auto supplier Oman USA, and ag tech firm Tyrannus, which recently selected Westfield for its global headquarters. Up next, what's it like to have 33 cars coming at you at more than 220 miles per hour? Well, we're going to find out next when we catch up with IMS Radio Network announcer and broadcaster Jake Query. Well, the fastest field in history is poised to take the green flag for the 105th running of the Indianapolis 500. And the best news, there will be fans on hand to witness the greatest spectacle in racing. Bill Benner has more in this week's Inside Indiana Sports. Bill.
Thank you, Gary. Veteran Scott Dixon will lead the field of 33 that includes numerous young guns, former winners, and an all-majority female team. Joining us today to offer a preview is a veteran of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Network, Jake Query, who will be calling the race from his perch high above the third turn. And Jake, thanks for being with us today. Good to see you, my friend.
Bill, it's good to see you as well, and it's weird for me to think that I'm actually one of those old veterans as opposed to the young guns that's covering the race, but thrilled that it's the month of May.
Well, and again, every May presents us with storylines, usually 33, but this one seems to be particularly so, again, with the emergence of these young stars, a veteran like Scott Dixon, the Iceman, on the pole, and great racers coming from the back of the pack. I mean, where do you begin? Where do you begin?
You know, there are a lot of storylines to your point, which is accurate. Scott Dixon is clearly kind of the class of the field, but it's such a deep field and so much goes into 200 laps and keeping it clean. And, you know, nobody knows that more than Scott Dixon, who's got one win back in 2008. But you look at Elio Castroneves chasing win number 4. And the question with Castroneves, of course, when you're operating with the team and you need 7 clean pit stops and suddenly you're working with guys that aren't necessarily doing pit stops each and every weekend over the course of the race season, that comes into play, trying to keep that clean. And then the 4 Penskes. There's no question about the fact that Roger Penske's teams are used to running up front. But when you start towards the back of the field, the question becomes, is that a concern when they have other cars around them? Setting your car up for being fast in qualifying is totally different than having a car set up for being fast with 32 other cars on the track, creating all kinds of air bouncing off of cars. You would think that Roger Penske's cars would be able to handle that, be set up for it, and be able to get themselves towards the front. But that's one of the things that certainly is to watch.
It's going to be great, Jake, because the obvious thing, fans back after not being able to attend last August's Indianapolis 500. And so the atmosphere, I know everyone is looking forward to actually having those grandstands fill up, not to full capacity, but still it's going to be great to have folks back at the track.
Absolutely. It was so strange, Bill. You know, it was almost a guilty feeling, truth be told, to be inside the venue in August to call that race. Once the race began, you're focused on what's happening on track, but there was no doubt about the fact that I think Charlie Kimball said it best. The soul of the Indianapolis 500, you know, it's the fans, and it was soulless. And so even at 135,000, which is still a lot of people, there was a buzz and an electricity through qualifying of having folks there. So to be able to have people come out, I will love nothing more than the first time that I have to slam on the brakes of my golf cart because somebody just jumps right in the way in the walking path as I'm trying to get out to turn 3. I've never welcomed it more in my life, Bill.
And Jake, this will also be the opportunity for fans to see a number of the changes that have taken, the physical changes. And I have not been out there yet. Look forward to being there on race day. But what Roger Penske has done to the infrastructure of the track, I'm hearing, is really terrific.
It is 5,000 gallons of paint, and that's just the start of it in order to paint over, you know, where you used to see just cinder block walls and, you know, some areas that definitely had been aging. There's no doubt that it's undergone a facelift, a lot of new fencing for that matter. So every nook and cranny, every aspect of what needed to be aesthetically improved has undergone an improvement. There's no question about it. And I know that, you know, all the way from the turn 1 entrance, you know, all the way through, I think the Penske Entertainment Group was very excited about showing that off last year. And then, of course, we know what happened with the world circumstances. So a lot of excitement just to be able for fans to look around and think, you know what, that has undergone a quick power wash, which is pretty cool.
Jake, another Penske initiative, a majority female team led by Beth Peretta. Simona Di Silvestro will be the, and she's a veteran. But again, that's an important initiative.
It is an important initiative, and I know it's important to the Penske Entertainment Group to try to diversify not only the fan base, but the participants at the Indianapolis 500. And what better way to get a diverse fan base and grow that fan base than to have participants that those fans can relate to. So to be able to have a team, as Beth Peretta put together, with predominantly females, and Simona Di Silvestro, as you mentioned, Bill, she hasn't been here since 2015, but she's an experienced race car driver. She's been very competitive at the Indy 500 and is, you know, a fan favorite because of her pleasant personality and her driving style both. So it's a win-win all the way around. And even though they're starting towards the back of the field, they have all of that access to Roger Penske's team telemetry and data. So they're another one that the way their car is set up for Simona in the course of the race may be totally different than the way it was set up for qualifying. So she may have an opportunity to move her way through the field.
Jake, as we wrap up, and I hate to do this in a condensed time, it's well documented that you nearly suffered a fatal heart attack, rushed to community hospital, the doctor that saved you, and this is so wonderful. The doctor that saved your life will be joining you as your spotter in the third turn on race day. I mean, I think that is just tremendous.
Well, I appreciate it, Bill. There's no doubt about the fact that my heart has always been with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Indy 500. So when my heart decided to clog itself up in October with a blood clot, and I went to Community Health Network and Dr. Benjamin Mottman, I'm lucky he was working that day because he was able to give me an angioplasty and a stent. And he told me that through the entire procedure, I was awake and alert the whole time. And he said, man, you talked the entire time. And I said, well, if I talk the entire time during your job, why don't you come to see my job where I have to talk all the time? So he's excited for it. I'm excited for it. It's symbolic, no question, but he's a great guy. And he's the reason I'm sitting here and the reason I'm able to go to the greatest spectacle in racing. So I wanted him to be a part of it.
Well, and we look forward to listening to you on race. The IMS radio network, there's none better. And everybody, that's a consensus. So we wish you the best. Let's have a great race day. And thanks for being with us, Jake.
Bill, it's always a pleasure. I look forward to talking to you again. And also, of course, looking forward to the race on Sunday.
You got it. Gary, back to you.
All right, Bill, thank you. You know, race day is a lot like Christmas Day for Indianapolis Motor Speedway President Doug Boles. He recently joined me for a candid conversation in our Business and Beyond podcast. Boles fell in love with the track when he was a little boy. His dad took him to his first race at the Speedway in 1977. That's the year A.J. Foyt won his fourth 500. He talks about why fans come first, the balancing act of preserving tradition along with innovation, Roger Penske's attention to detail, and his time serving as a team co-owner with Jim Harbaugh.
There was never a dull moment with Jim. A few years ago, we did a Panther reunion where the ownership, the group of us that started Panther, got together, and Jim actually came in town. And the fun part about Jim is he didn't pack any clothes. He landed. Gary Pettigo picked him up. They took him to the Walmart so he could buy his Dickie pants and the things that you know him for. And then he showed up for the dinner after getting clothes there. So he's a one-of-a-kind guy. He made it an awful lot of fun, but that was a really neat era for all of us. There's no way you're going to outwork Roger Penske. He is focused on the goal. He's relentless in terms of getting to the finish line, and he gets there paying attention to all the little details. And then his passion for this place on top of that probably makes him even more effective in this space than he is in his business side, where he's been so successful. Early on, when it was announced that Roger Penske was buying the Speedway, before it was the deal closed in January, we announced in January 2020, but we announced in November of 2019. And in early December, Roger asked me if I would meet him for breakfast. And what he was really doing, I think, was talking to the team, trying to make sure people were committed to staying and committed to being part of it with the change from the Holman George ownership. So he said, "Can you meet me for breakfast downtown at the hotel? Why don't you meet me at 6:30?" And I said, "Absolutely no problem." And I got home that night and I said to Beth, I said, I can't be late, so I'm going to get up early and make sure I'm super early when I'm there. So I parked the car out in front of the hotel about 6:05. Walk in, it's like 6:07. So I'm 23 minutes early. And I walk in the door of the hotel, and Roger Penske's sitting in the lobby looking out the front door, and he said, "I'm glad you could make it on time." And I thought to myself, I'm 23 minutes early, but I think I'm probably late for Roger Penske time.
You can listen to much more of my conversation with Doug Boles and many other fascinating Hoosiers on the Business and Beyond podcast. Just go to InsideIndianaBusiness.com and click on the subscribe tab. Well, up next, Hoosier farmer Larry Clemens. He knows a thing or two about the important relationship between land and water. Find out how he's putting that expertise to work and leading Indiana's conservancy efforts. Well, the Nature Conservancy of Indiana is looking to raise its profile and impact by increasing land conservation and improving freshwater resources. Another goal, improving signage and messaging at 10 flagship preserves around the state. Larry Clemens is in charge of that assignment and much more around the state, and we're about to learn much more as Larry's Steuben County farming experience come in very handy in his role as state director of the Nature Conservancy of Indiana. And Larry, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Your background, your expertise in conservation is very lengthy. You've been with the Conservancy for some 30 years, currently serving as state director. Everyone's heard of the Nature Conservancy, but I don't know that everyone fully understands the mission. In a nutshell, give us a thumbnail description of the Nature Conservancy and really what it's all about.
Well, I'll use 4 words to describe us. We're about protecting nature and preserving life.
Very good.
We've been around for 60 years in Indiana, and so we have quite a bit of experience here in the state. Yeah,
well, your experience, I think, that you bring to the role is unique. You're a farmer in north central Indiana. You also served as the Nature Conservancy's North American Ag Director as well. You've established a lot of relationships with the private sector, with businesses around Indiana. As you look at conservation, talk, if you will, about the importance of the private sector, of business, and also agriculture, all working together.
Yeah, well, I spent a lot of time doing conservation, both in the field and now more in a management role. And I've always found that the private sector can really drive change at a large scale. As a conservation organization, we can certainly impact thousands of acres. But when the private sector gets engaged, we can impact millions of acres. And that really came to be as I was working as a North American agriculture director and working with some of the largest corporations in the food and agricultural sector, where we were setting and designing programs that were literally out there working with farmers and impacting millions of acres towards more sustainable food production, which of course was much better for the environment. So I do think the private sector, business sector, if you will, is critical to advancing this notion of preserving nature and protecting life.
Yeah, nice source. Alcoa, Honda, Steel Dynamics, a number of the companies I know you've had relationship with in your role. You know, many times I think people look at agriculture and conservation maybe sometimes being at odds, food production being at odds, but you really feel the opposite. You think there's a real opportunity for partnership and collaboration to make things better for everyone.
Yes, I really do. I think for decades, we have always sort of seen agriculture and nature as separate and sort of, you know, almost at odds with each other. But more and more, we've learned that, in fact, they're dependent on each other. And I'll use an example of like soil health, the life in our soil, the microbes and things like that that we can maintain there leads to better water quality and at the same time more face right now that working with nature is the key to success and sustainability.
Yeah, unfortunately, I only have about 30 seconds, but give us, you've got a 5-year strategic plan. You're looking at an additional 40,000 acres for conservation. What's the next, 5 years or so look like for the Conservancy?
Well, we're going to be busy for sure. We've protected over 100,000 acres in our history, but these 40,000 acres we're going to do in the next 5 years will involve some traditional land acquisition, will involve important partnerships with state, federal agencies, local land trusts, and it also involves local landowners and how they manage their land and getting better management onto their lands and natural areas.
Larry Clemens is the Indiana State Director of the Nature Conservancy. Larry, really appreciate you joining us. Hope you will keep in touch and keep us updated on your efforts.
I'll look forward to that. Thank you.
All right. And I'll be right back after this. Stay with us. Coming up next week, the Oasis Diner in Plainfield dates back to the 1950s after it arrived from New Jersey by train. Since then, this historical landmark has been relocated, restored, and reopened on the National Road. We'll take you inside. Thanks for joining us this week. I'm Gary Dick. Go out and make it a successful week.
Inside Indiana Business with Gary Dick is a production of Grow Indiana Media Ventures, with support from WFYI Productions.